Good evening and welcome to the Gene Siskel Film Center's Screen to Screen. My name is Lori Heil and I'm the coordinator of media and community engagement for the Gene Siskel Film Center. We're thrilled to have you with us tonight for a virtual movie conversation with director Tom Dolby and actress Lena Olin for their new film, The Artist's Wife. If you haven't seen the film yet, please do check it out. It's wonderful. You can stream it by visiting our website at siskelfilmcenter.org/The Artist's Wife. We'll also put this address in the comment section on Facebook so you can find it easily and watch it. As you watch tonight's presentation on Facebook, we encourage you to post questions for our guests in the comment section, and then we'll magically forward these questions to our moderator, who will then ask our special guests if we have time. We ask that you keep your questions clean, film-related, and brief so that we can get to as many questions as possible. The conversation will last about 45 minutes. I'd like to briefly introduce tonight's special guests, and then we'll get started. Tom Dolby is a filmmaker, producer, and novelist. He was the writer and co-director of the feature film Last Weekend, starring Patricia Clarkson and Zachary Booth. He's the principal and founder of Water's End Productions. That's an LA-based production company that's produced several acclaimed films, including Call Me By Your Name and Little Men. I could spend the whole evening talking about Lena Olin's bio, but I'm just going to offer some highlights. Lena Olin is a Swedish actress who's been nominated for numerous acting awards and won many, including a Golden Globe for The Unbearable Lightness of Being and an Academy Award for Enemies, A Love Story. Other well-known films she's appeared in include After the Rehearsal by Ingmar Bergman, CHOCOLAT, directed by her husband, Lasse Hallström, Queen of the Damned. Lasse is also somewhere in the same building as her. Queen of the Damned, Casanova, and The Reader. Olin was a main cast member also in the second season and a recurring guest star in later seasons of the television series Alias. And she starred in the American-Swedish sitcom, Welcome to Sweden. Tonight's conversation will be moderated by Kyle Henry, Associate Professor of Documentary Media for Northwestern University's MFA program. Kyle is also a filmmaker. The film recently showed his latest feature, Rogers Park, which filmed in Chicago's diverse Rogers Park neighborhood. And now, without further ado, I will leave you with Tom, Lena, and moderator Kyle Henry. Thank you.
Welcome. First off, I just want to thank you both for your commitment to bringing a difficult, raw, and emotionally powerful story to the screen. I think you escaped a lot of the traps that are associated with stories that often deal with characters that have dementia or Alzheimer's. And first and foremost, I think Richard and Claire are like fully developed, amazing characters. I wanted to begin first just with each of you telling us, how you came to this story. Tom, maybe as originator, what made this film and this story necessary for you to bring to the screen right now?
Yeah, there were a few different impulses that sort of all came together for me in this sort of serendipitous sort of way. I'd been very interested for a long time in this idea of a creative couple, and especially when one artist is his career takes off, and the spouse, who's historically is often female, has to support him or decides to support him, and has to sadly give up her own career in large part. And so I was very interested in that theme. I was interested in the dementia theme, having experienced that myself with my father and seeing what my mother went through and in supporting him. And then I just really find the topic of relationships and marriage fascinating, but particularly a real marriage and relationship between two people over, the age of like 55, because when do we see that in film? Hardly ever, and see it as something that's intimate and loving and very real.
That's all of that was there, on the screen. For Lena, I guess the same question, what made this film or this role necessary for you to be involved with at this point, you know, in your life?
When I first read the script, I was so taken by how Claire was so sweet and so normal and yet so powerful. Through the story, we see her power. When she needs it, she has it. And I think I think a lot of women can relate to you live your life and you care about others, and life asks you to do things that you do, and you don't even realize how sides of yourself that you leave behind. And I think that has happened to Claire, that so much of who she was or still is, she sort of left. And that to me is very moving, and it's very real. And I think it's relatable for a lot of women, certainly, and maybe men too. But I see it in a lot of women, that life takes over, and who you were, you kind of forget yourself. And through this devastating, this tragedy that hits them, she has to reconnect to who she is, because she cannot no longer rely on the routines of the day and the taking care of someone else. And I don't need to think about that because I'm focusing on him and he needs me. And she can't do that anymore, because it all stops with this horrible, horrible, horrible tragedy. And I think I really loved how she reconnects with who she is, and she finds her power through that.
Well, I love the irony too of this horrible tragedy that you express about the disease, but in some way it also opens a window for her at a stage of life, as Tom was mentioning, we don't often see pictured in our stories. Like, what about, for Tom and for Lena, what about that journey, you know, was touched you, was relevant for you now?
I think for me, it's just this idea that when something, you know, it's interesting, there is this idea of tragedy, but I also think of it as like, this is something that happens in life. You know, this is a disease that happens to so many people, and then there are so many other things that can happen. And so I don't think of it so, I mean, it is tragic, but it's like, it's also so much part of daily life. And it's one of these challenges that she fortunately is able to turn into an opportunity, and able to turn into something that she can, you know, can make the most of. So it's this sort of impetus for her to rediscover this part of herself that she left behind. And, you know, I mean, we would, if this happened in real life, you know, that would be a wonderful thing, and hopefully for some people it does. But I think it's, you know, it is an awfully difficult thing to pull off. But hopefully her story is inspiring, you know, to people who are going through difficult times.
I noticed from your work, Tom, that you draw from biography, autobiography. You know, what made this, you know, a work of fiction that you needed to tell, maybe that versus like a documentary? What, and, you know, with Lena too, like, what is it about creating these characters that you can bring maybe biography or autobiography, you know, to in some way? Like, what makes it compelling for you to work it with these fictional lives that you make so real?
I'll let Lena ask. It's almost the opposite question for each of us. How do you how do you bring autobiography into fiction? I'll let you answer first.
I think that almost everything we do on film, on screen, like for actors, certainly, it is sort of hidden documentaries, 1,000 documentaries hidden in there, because it's like we all take from what we've seen, from what we've experienced, from what I feel sometimes like we, as actors, we're sort of born to observe and we have this, I have this hunger, this extraordinary curiosity other people, what they do and what they say and how they react and and I think these are the little bits and pieces that we bring along, and then we use them for the characters. So it's a little bit of like slivers of life that we've seen or experienced for ourselves, or someone we love, or people we know, or people we don't know. Like when I grew up in Sweden, and when my mom and I used to go to the beach because we loved the sun, like all Swedes do, because it's so rare in Sweden. And we would always go to the most crowded place, and we would squeeze our little towel in, and we would lie there and sort of listen and observe and see families together and see dads and the relationship with the kid. And he's really not happy. I think this marriage, no, because he really likes her. And that's, you know, we had all these stories. So when I started drama school, and they said, now you should start observing people on the subway and start fantasizing about who they are. I was like, my God, I don't do anything but that. That's what I do every time. So if I'm in a hotel and I'm sitting down, I always wake up very early and I'm having my breakfast. And when my family comes down, I'm like, I think they really don't. I think that marriage is over. I think that, you know, I have stories about, no, that's the brother. Because I'm sort of secretly been observing everyone. So I think everything we do is like teeny bits of documentaries put together in a feature. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I think from the writing and directing perspective, I mean, Lena, you said something in an interview a while back about how you felt so much heart on the page, and like I'd put so much of my heart on the page, and you do, and there is that emotional truth to it, which I think is part of all good stories, all good films. But the fictional part of it is, so much of it is fiction. The whole thing about the Hamptons, the whole thing about them being painters, the actual events of it are fiction. Every once in a while, like a line slips in there or something, and I'll think like, oh, my dad did say that, maybe in a different context or something, but that has a personal truth for me. But then there are a lot of personal truths that are, just completely created. Gosh, I don't know why this comes to mind, but like when Angela says, I follow her on Facebook, and I think, I mean, that's actually, I didn't write that line, but I love that line because that's so real, and it's not something that I do per se, but I mean, that's so real. Who doesn't have the desire to follow their ex on Facebook? It's like, of course, it makes sense.
That's what I mean, that somebody said that. Somebody said that to someone who registers that and uses it. And I think that's how it works. And the fact that they live in the Hamptons, it's their artists, so they live in the Hamptons. But also, you had a house in the Hamptons. So you knew, you take pieces and you put it together into, because that's how it resonates with other people, because it really resonates with you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, maybe there was, especially with my last film being about a woman in her early 50s, and then I had so many women of that age group and maybe a little older coming up to me and saying, thank you so much for putting this on the screen. Actually, I think it was at the Siskel Center that there was this woman who was in tears, and she said, how did you know what I was going through? And that experience stayed with me, of these different people talking to me. And so I think that was really a motivation. One of the motivations behind creating this story was this idea that this is not a story often told. And we know the dementia story is told, but it's not usually from the perspective of the person taking care of or married to the person who has the disease.
Yeah, it was wonderful to see the transformation of Claire and her development, and her perspective sort of is there in every scene, which is rare. Normally the focus would be on the person's suffering the disease. I also love the performances, and the relationship is so messy. Like, I think in documentaries there's so much thinking always about ethics and the promotional veneer of the subject, that you could show a really messy, complicated, a lot of darkness and light mixed in relationship. And sometimes I think documentarians are kind of afraid to show all that messiness, because their subjects will come and say, why did you make me look this way? So, as a film educator, I like sneaking in this question of, directors, what can you share about a moment on set, maybe working with, a great actor like Lena, where you learned something about directing? Do you remember anything, from this project that stood out for you as like one of those aha moments about directing and working with actors?
Oh gosh, that's a tricky question, because I have to say directing Lena was very, very easy. We were just so in sync, and we were such partners through it all. And I would say like 3 words and she'd go, and I would know like she gets it. Like we don't have to spend a lot of time talking about it. I think for me, one of the biggest things is you do as much as you can to get to know your actors ahead of time. And it's partly because I want to, because I'm going to work with them, but because I think they're interesting people, and you sort of have a friendship of a sort that starts, and that's always exciting. But there's also a sort of a logistical, practical reason that you do it, is because you want to be able to have that shorthand with them on set when you have such a limited amount of time, and you want to be able to say, okay, this, da, 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 and they'll understand, exactly what you're talking about, because you have taken the time to learn about their childhood. I mean, I remember, I think it was on like our second phone call, Lena, that I said, how did you and your husband meet? And this technically has nothing to do with the film, but I said, I want to know how this woman met her husband, because how can I direct a story about a marriage if I don't know her own personal story? So that I think has always been a lesson for me, and has always paid off in a really lovely way, not only in the friendship that develops, but just in that you have a way of working together that is, I won't say effortless, because nothing in a film is ever effortless, but it works very well.
And Lena, like what do you find useful, in terms of direction that you receive? And maybe also like, what do you find not useful, and you don't need to name names from your past or, direction, but I'm always interested too, like in terms of like, what isn't helpful, for an actress to get into.
What's fun for us as actors is like every single new film is a new universe, because every director works so differently. Actually, Sidney Pollack said to me that directing is like lovemaking, that this is what we do and it's so important, but we never see other people do it. We're never in the room with other people. He was married and he led a very straight life, so I guess he was never. But I think very few directors are always so curious of each other. And when I grew up as an actor, when I started working with Bergman, there was another big shot director who was amazing called Bouvier de Berg, who actually was internationally acclaimed too. He made the Lua Madigan, and these two. So I worked with Widerberg during the day filming, and I worked with Bergman rehearsing and playing in his play at night. And the jealousy and the curiosity, and it was like they were jealous lovers, they wanted to know, so what did you do? And Bergman would try to be polite and like, oh, that sounds nice, and the other one was like, ew, why did you do that? And I think there's a curiosity, and rightly so, because every new director is like a new universe and a new adventure. And for me as an actor, I think it's really, really helpful to just be wide open, to not bring like, this is how I work and this is what tools I like to use, to stay super open. And that goes for fellow actors too, because it's very different. If you're working with good actors, it's always interesting to see how they go about things. And again, it's part of the joy to meet new directors with like totally different. It's like another job, another profession almost with every new director.
That's wonderful. I really love in the film showing Claire's sensual being. So many American films kind of have a way of like flattening or erasing like women of a certain age as like sexuality, like embodied sexuality. Like how important for the both of you, you know, as director or as a performer is, you know, this is kind of a obvious question, but sensuality or your body, you know, and using it as a tool to show you know, this aspect of Claire.
I think it's so important. I mean, to me, the idea of, I love one review we got, I think in the Hollywood Reporter, said displays rare sophistication for a non-European film, and then talks about exactly what you're talking about, is that this idea that there can be a sexuality and sensuality and passion, you know, at this age. And to me, that concept that there wouldn't be that is so foreign. It's like, I'm thrilled that they thought we were being so sophisticated, but we weren't trying. To me, that was just like the way life should be. And, you know, and I totally agree with you. It is flattened is a great way of putting it. It's often flattened. And I think you have, you know, there's you know, they say like for actors, the body is an instrument. So why wouldn't you use every part of your body? And yeah, I don't know. I don't have a super coherent answer to that, except just that it just seems like it's part of everyday life. And, you know, if you're going to show people having dinner and, you know, talking with their mouth full or whatever, why wouldn't you also show them in bed, you know?
That wasn't a very coherent question on my part, so I'm sorry.
No, your question,
Lena,
your question was great. I'm curious what actually, I have to tell one really quick anecdote. So, I mean, Lena, I think we shot those scenes, the bedroom scenes, on like the third day maybe. And, and you know, you were in your underwear, and I was talking to Charlie, our script supervisor. I said, oh, you know, aren't you going to be in there? I saw him walking away, and he goes, oh, no, very serious, very professional. Oh, no, I would not be in the room. This is a nude scene. And I looked at him, it's like, she's in her underwear. This is not a nude scene, you know? I thought that was very sweet, and yet also very like American and very non-European, to be like a little uptight about it, you know? And it was like, to me, the character, you know, she's getting undressed. Why wouldn't she be in her underwear? It's no big deal. So I don't know, Lena, how that experience, you know, I say it's no big deal. Maybe it's a big, you know, I can't speak for you.
I feel, and I've felt that all through my career, that there's one place where I feel not exposed, and that is on a movie set. Even with, and I've done a lot of things, you know, starting with my first American movie, it was a lot of nudity and a lot of love scenes. And first of all, I've never been uptight with my own body, and that's, it's sort of part of my work. It's like my fears or my body or my voice or my shame or my joy or my, I need to use what I have if people want to watch it. And it's very interesting how I've never ever on a movie set felt exposed, because what you just described, I think it's an people in the crew are so darn careful. So you never, like, if you take something off, it's like I've seen people almost kill themselves from like turning away, trying to do their job as a boom guy or whatever, but not looking because they want to show you the respect. And people are like all over you with towels and robes. As soon as cut, you're so covered, which is extraordinary. And I think that is such a sweet and beautiful part of our job, that you never ever feel other than totally, you know, that they respect you in that regard. So that's fun. But also, I think what Tom was saying, to show people of all ages having sex, being in love, arguing, struggling. I think when I see that, when I see women who are still women, even though they're not 20 on screen or in life, it inspires me. And I think it's super important, really. Why should we tell half of the population that when you reach a certain age, it's over? You're no longer a woman, you're just someone who can carry groceries and maybe, you know, it's so bizarre. And I think it's interesting because I see a cultural difference too when I go back to Sweden, or actually we were in the Hamptons having dinner at the restaurant, and Lasse and I were having dinner in one part of the restaurant and in another part, and we absolutely couldn't hear what they were saying. But I said, I bet you they're Swedish, because there was something about her that she was like, she had ripped jeans, and not in a stupid way, and she was clearly like between 60 and 70. Her hair was down, and she was, you know, I guess she wasn't smoking, because, you know, but she was drinking her wine, and she was like, she wasn't behaving like an older lady. And I think we could, if that's what we want, but the freedom of being everything until we don't want to be, you know, but I think it's super inspiring to me when I see women on screen who behave like women, even at an older age. And I think that's so cool and so appealing. And I want to contribute to that if I can, because I really think it makes a difference.
Well, I think you have contributed that, like, as there's something about you, I think, that directors see. I mean, I remember sneaking in and seeing Unbearable Lightness of Being when I like couldn't go in, you know, legally. And that was like one of the first like naughty films I saw on like a huge screen. And it was the thing, I didn't feel it was naughty like in any way, because there was something so comfortable about your kind of fearlessness and kind of inquisitiveness, like everything. There's something even with Claire that feels very she's interested in what's happening. Like hopefully everyone's seen the film. I'm not doing spoiler alerts here, but there is another love scene that takes place later in the film, and there was something just very organic about it being a surprise that I thought was a beautiful moment. I don't know if there was a question in there. Sorry.
No, but it was, I really appreciate what you just said. So who cares? What's the question?
I guess, you know,
I like that.
Maybe this question is, you know, we're located here at a theater within like the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, which is like a world-renowned art school. And there's so much in this film about art making, the art business, about the place of women, you know, in fine arts. I'm curious, like, what thoughts you walked away with, you know, after making this project. I mean, the project definitely has a lot of statements about that, but I'm just, for both of you, you know, what changed for you over making this project, about your thoughts about art making?
For me, it changed. I'm going to let Tom answer because he's much more knowledgeable when it comes to art and the art world, and has studied it. And you connected me with one of your friends from college who now deals with art. And it was surprising to me that it's so much of a business. And that's also reflected in the movie when it's so important financially, because he has this big show and it's already so much money because suddenly someone is in or hip or famous and everyone wants to buy that person's art. And it's the prices skyrocket, and I hadn't really understood the business side of it. That's so big, and I didn't know that before, or I wasn't aware of how big it is and how much a financial world the art world is too. I thought it was like a Rembrandt would be expensive, and the rest was, but that whole fluctuation that suddenly someone is in, and then it's like, but I think that's really the desperation to have that show happening. It's financial too, because it's already so many investments, and the way Tanya's character, who is Claire's best friend, pushes, like, I have to see the pieces, I have to see the paintings, because for her, it's like so important financially that it actually happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think we see in the film just a little bit, when you consider like what Claire is doing and what Richard is doing, and then what their friend Ada is doing. And these are such completely different paths. And, you know, it's easy to look at Ada and say, oh, she's so free and she's doing all this performance stuff and video stuff. But in a weird way, she is also kind of in her own box, where people if she were to go and do some abstract paintings like Claire does, people would probably say, well, what, we don't understand, what, this is not what we expect from you. And I think that is a little bit sad. It's like when a filmmaker comes out with something completely different from what they've done before. I think there is, unfortunately, some of this hunger for like, could you just do more of the same, maybe a little bit different, but not that different, you know? And so I think I love how we see, you know, I love it when Claire goes to Ada's show, she's intrigued, and it's sort of, that scene to me is always like Alice in Wonderland or something. You know, it's this whole bright candy colored world. And yet she thinks like, this is not what I'm doing, you know, and should I have done this? I don't know, but that wouldn't, you know, that wouldn't be true to her. So I think there are, you know, these little boxes that either we put ourselves in or, you know, the art world can put artists in, and that, you know, it's, to me, that's interesting. And I love it when I see a retrospective of an artist's work and things are so different from period to period. I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, I love the way that marketing is not art, you know, for Claire, and here she's erasing herself kind of again in the last act, but she's, you know, she's done the thing, she's done the work. It doesn't matter to her that it's used under the guise to make money for the family. It's like the important thing for her. And so like, that's like, for me, like the pure part of art is like, you just make yourself happy.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a wonderful moment.
Yeah, I really like that part too, that she actually doesn't need to take the credit and the joy, because there's also, and I often thought, would she have started painting had this not happened? I don't think so, because she's so full of self-doubt, and what she talked about, you know, when she goes into galleries and it's all so different and it's not what she did when she started out, and when she stopped painting, the art world was different, because I think it's evolving really fast, and she doesn't feel at home in it anymore, and she doesn't feel, and she has all this self-doubt, and I think being forced to just get out there and do it, which his diagnosis forces her out, she needs to start doing it, and then, as you said, the joy, the pure joy of I can create again is more important than everyone needs to know that this was me, you know. I like that too. I really like that part of Claire.
And I think it's so important to the idea for me of, and I think it is implied in the end, because she says, I'll do this again. I can do this again. And I will do this again, you know, and I hope there is the implication that, and next time I'm putting my own name on it.
Yeah.
You know, this is his final swan song, but after that, it's all her, you know, this is not, she's not going to be, you know, the ghost artist, you know, for him.
No.
It's not about that. It was sort of one final act of love.
Well, I really related to that and the difficulty of being an eclectic artist. The first two films I did were feature fiction works, and one of them played at Cannes at Directors Fortnight. And it's interesting, I've made documentaries, it's like, oh, you're a documentarian. It's like, well, no, I'm a human being, and I'm just interested in things. So I appreciated that. Speaking of like, what are you interested in next? I'm always curious too of what both of you are working on now, or where, you know, this film was completed in earlier this year, is this correct, or the end of last year?
Sort of end of last year, and we were supposed to come out in April, and then of course that was postponed. So end of last year. Yeah.
I mean, I shouldn't ask, what are you working on now? Because there's a global pandemic going on. But still, I'm curious, like, what do people have in develop, or what are they dreaming about doing once perhaps this is not the world we're living in?
It's a good time to develop material, certainly. I mean, there's a script that my company's commissioned. We optioned a book called Women in Sunlight. That's about three women in their 60s who have what's that?
Ooh.
Yeah, I know, something new. No, it was very funny because we had just finished Call Me by Your Name and that whole thing, and I had gotten back from shooting The Artist's Wife, and this book sort of landed on our doorstep, and it was like, oh my God, this book feels like The Artist's Wife meets Call Me by Your Name in a way, because they end up going to Italy. Instead of going to this upscale retirement community, they go to Italy and discover new passions. So, you know, I hope I'm not, you know, treading over, you know, the same ground again, per se, but it's, I love this idea that we can reinvent at any age. That's very exciting to me.
Having gone through my midlife crisis, yes, like
Yeah.
you definitely have other opportunities.
Yeah.
Lena, like, what are you dreaming about doing, you know,
Well,
what are you working on?
I did after Artist's Wife, I did season 1 of Hunters for Amazon, and that is, it's already created, the whole season 2. It's just that it all came to a halt because of the pandemic. So we were supposed to shoot that now, actually, and it's going to be pushed till the spring. So that's something that I'm super excited about, because I really love the writing of David Weil, who's the creator of the show, and it's really fun. And then, of course, Hilma of Klint, the film Hilma that my husband is writing and will direct, starting in March. You know, but it's shooting basically in Sweden and Portugal, I think. So it should be okay for the pandemic. But and the start date is we were supposed to shoot now, but it's been pushed. And it's really, you know, with, as you both can relate to, with a project, if you have to wait, it's sort of, it gets better, and you work on the script and you're rethinking things and you go further, you know, so it's not bad, and it's kind of good. But I think we're ready to go with that. We're like horses, like just waiting to get out there and do it. So
we have a question from the live stream, and maybe you can help me figure out what the question is. It's like, will there be a future reveal, and it's capital R and EVEAL in quotes, and then parentheses, you know, the art market in NYC always wanting closure. So maybe they're asking, like, what's next for Claire? Well, what do you imagine next, you know, after the story ends? I think that's what that question means.
I mean, I imagine that she's going to have a career of her own, you know, and I think, you know, it's an interesting question of, you know, would she eventually take credit for these paintings? I feel like she would, maybe like 10 years from now, she would. But I think for her preserving his legacy, and his, certainly while he's alive, but even after he passes, preserving his legacy, I think, is very important. And she, again, you know, I think for those of us who are creative, like, I never worry about my work being stolen, because there's more ideas where those came from. If I'm helping a friend or whatever, and what, you know, I don't know, oh, they used my idea. Like, there's more where those came from. So, and I think Claire is the same way. Like, this is a small show for her. You know, she's got many more paintings to do.
And I think what you said with the joy of creating, that is such a joy. And of course, we need to make a living, but there is the pure joy of creating. And I do think that she's going to keep on painting, but that's tricky how she's going to solve that, because obviously she doesn't want to humiliate him and be like, but I painted. But she's definitely not giving up painting again. I think she's going to keep on working and keep on painting and her own career.
A question maybe from that, I'm just curious, have you ever had a difficult moment where you've had to navigate the art versus commerce, Scylla and Charybdis, and, you know, did you find like a creative solution, you know, to some of the problems that might have presented themselves? A difficult moment maybe in your careers, that I'm just throwing that question out there.
I think there's often times when you get a note or whatever, and, you know, we got some notes actually from some foreign distributors that were like, oh, Richard is too nasty. could you just take out this, this, and this? And they were like some of his best moments. And it was, you know, and I said, no, I'm not going to take it out. You know, that's, you're taking the teeth out of the character, and, you know, and then you have nothing. So I have been lucky to be able to resist that. But yeah, there are always things, or like how things are marketed or whatever, and you think, oh, this is not how it was in my mind, you know, and you fight back, and then sometimes you step back from it, and I realize, oh, I was just being difficult, you know. So, I don't know. What about you, Lena?
I think that my journey has been so different since I came from, because growing up as an actor in Sweden in the 70s, where everything was super political and everything had to be about art, and art was always political, or being on the weaker person's side. You were always on the weaker side. So even coming to America and starting to make movies and starting to be more generous to myself in what I could do without feeling guilty that I was giving up on something, was an interesting journey. So I think I had my turn there, not to be like, can we really play Chekhov? Is that political? Is it true art anymore? You know, it's like, to go from that to making films in America was a huge step. And I think that was my sort of like coming to terms with, you don't have to be so hard on yourself every time you make something that doesn't feel like this is art that no one is going to make any money out of. You know, I think that I had my journey there. So, you know, because we all need to make a living, and some of the things that we do, because we kind of, it's a little frivolous to do. I felt that when I did Alias, which is something that I'm so proud of now that I did, and it was J.J. Abrams that, he was the creator of Alias, and I was shooting something in Los Angeles, and we had a meeting, and he was like, it's a spy show, and it's like, oh wow. And the way he talked about my character, I was like, this will be fun. And it was fun. And I remember, but what if, and he said, I'll make it work for you, baby. I was like, okay, I trust you. And I think the way he wrote and the way he created scenes, that was so phenomenal, and that was very artistic. But if somebody had told me when I was just, you know, at the Royal Dramatic Theatre, just left drama school, you're going to be in an American spy show, it's like, no, no, I'm not going to be in an American spy show. But that was sort of a huge, fun, interesting thing that I'm so proud of that I did. So it's like when Kurosawa was named the 3 best movies, and I remember Sidney Pollack, who was a great friend of mine, was so proud of that. He mentioned Tootsie, and he said, like, I'm now even more proud of Tootsie, because you think Kurosawa would say like, oh, it's a small Russian movie that no one has seen, a few friends of mine. I think that I've learned the joy of being more generous to myself in my choices and what I can do, and if I feel something, go for it, you know?
Well, I loved in the film how Claire's art is so much a joyful process to herself, for her and for her audience, and the paintings are so full of joy. And I like the contrast between the other artist who's doing the video art, which is very serious. it has a very, you know, conceptual, you know, element to it. There was something very liberating about seeing that art can also encompass joy and not just pain or suffering. So it was wonderful. Trying to think of a wrap-up question here. I'm not an interviewer by trade, so this is curious in terms of your own relationship to Alzheimer's and dementia. You know, Tom, you mentioned, you know, the struggles that your father went through. I'm also curious, you know, Lena, you know, anything that you brought from struggles of people that you knew or that you've observed in relationships to the role? Because I think, again, there's there's not a lot still being made about something that's affecting a lot of families, you know, worldwide. And I'm just curious, you know, what both of you again brought in terms of observations. Or Tom, what did you not want to do? You know, what were some things
we definitely did not want to do some of the more typical scenes that you see in like an Alzheimer's movie. And I don't think of this as an Alzheimer's movie. I think it's an element of it, but we didn't want to do, you know, the scene with the doctor where they do the cognitive tests and that kind of thing. I felt like that had been done and done well, and we didn't need to see that again. It was much more about Claire, and I always see that doctor scene as a little bit impressionistic, because we're not like showing the whole scene from beginning to end. It's almost like these little moments, you know, of the conversation, and more importantly, like how that's affecting Claire. But for me, the dementia thing it's not so important. It is, yes, it is about dementia and Alzheimer's, but it's not so important. It's more just a symbol, or, you know, sort of metaphor for any life change that we go through, any challenge, you know, because it could be dementia, it could be cancer, it could be your partner dying, it could be losing your job. I mean, it could be anything. And I mean, God knows, with everything we're going through, I mean, I have creative friends who are emailing me every day and saying, God, I'm going through a rough patch. This is really hard. And it's like, you know, if we can all take some hope that maybe something good will come out of it, out of, you know, these challenges, but that it's going to be a struggle and we have to get through that. For me, that's very much what this movie is about.
Sorry, Lena.
I think part of, and what Claire struggles with, and I think with anything, if a loved one goes through something, that's any kind of mental issues, or in this case, you know, the Alzheimer, or if there's something wrong, the pain, that almost becomes something that we're ashamed of. And we try to protect the loved one by not showing or not sharing. And I think Claire struggles with that. She's almost mad at the doctor when she said there are groups you can turn. Who do you turn to? Who do you talk to? No one. I couldn't betray him like that. And I think that's something that we all struggle with, the shame of pain, which is so, you know, we all have that. We all have people we love that go through things, or we go through things ourselves. And there's, you know, we have to be more comfortable with sharing, or being more, you know, sharing the pain.
Well, I love the moments of pain, and maybe both of you could maybe just share one moment with working with Bruce Dern, but I think there was something about, you know, yes, even though he can be a real problematic person, like you see also what she loved in him with the play, and she's also playing constantly as a technique to resuscitate the relationship, with the orange juice, you know, pouring onto the floor. You're trying at first to make this into something that could be a positive, but I'm just curious, working with Bruce Dern in the role, are there any takeaways or moments that you remember on set?
Well, Lena was in the thick of it, and she was. For me, it was watching a roller coaster, and the two of them were on the roller coaster. So you can speak to that better than I can.
Yeah, I feel that with Bruce, which is so refreshing and such a wonderful fun. And again, I like to stay open to my director and my colleagues and see what they, and obviously come with my own thing too. But Bruce has a way of just diving in and just doing it, and no rules apply, and he'll say whatever comes to his mind, and he'll do whatever he feels like doing. And that's a really fun way of working, because it's so, you need to either you just sort of dive in with him and have fun. And when you do that, I think you reach something else, because there's an authenticity that you actually acquire from working that way. It's like working, and I don't want to compare Bruce to a child, but it's like working with children, that, you know, suddenly they'll walk up or like spill the juice or do something and you either, if you're there as the character, it's very refreshing, and you get some golden moments from, you know. And I think, again, when we talked about directing, I think it's very wise, like you did, Tom, that you took care of that you weren't afraid of that you would sort of be patient with that, because you realize that I get something golden out of it. And I just had so much fun working with Bruce. It was super refreshing and super fun, and yeah.
Well, I thought he delivered a really, again, unstereotypical, portrait of somebody facing dementia. And that scene between when Claire comes home and finds Richard has torn up the house, both just the insanity that you get into sometimes with people who have dementia, of like, no, you're the one that's crazy. I just love that.
Yeah.
She seems so perplexed and bewildered that he is able to kind of turn it around and make it her problem, and want a divorce, anything but to realize that he has some sort of problem that he can't deal with. And I don't know if any of that was improvised, but it just felt so raw. And as somebody who's had a relative who has dementia, the kind of cuckoo moments you get into, where like at the end of it, you think you have dementia and you're the crazy one, because their performance is so brilliant. It's like, maybe I am crazy.
No, you're absolutely right. And it was, a lot of it was scripted, but yeah, there were a number of lines that were improvised and moments that were improvised. And I'm so proud of that scene in terms of how we put it together, but really like just how both Bruce and Lena just dove in and weren't afraid to, just go there, because the anger, those are not attractive emotions per se. And but I mean, but to me, there was a beauty in Claire, like showing how raw she was. And that is, I get chills whenever I see that scene. Even when I see the clip in the trailer, I get chills. It's just it's so authentic. So.
Well, as somebody who had a parent with Alzheimer's and dementia, it was incredibly authentic. And that was one of my favorite scenes, because I was very disoriented in that moment. And flashback. I'm just checking, Lori, do we have any more questions in the
I think that's it for right now. Yeah. So I mean, we could go on talking, I'm sure, all evening, but we should probably wrap up. So I wanted to thank all of you. I want to thank Lena Olin, Tom Dolby, Kyle Henry, all for being with us tonight. Because of you, we were able to reach out to our audience and provide context and insight into the artist's wife that they could not get otherwise. So again, thank you for that. And thank all of you for joining us this evening. Please check out our Facebook page if you'd like to see the film and you haven't already, for The Artist's Wife. You can also check out other films that we're playing in our Film Center from Your Sofa series. If you enjoyed tonight's conversation and are able, please consider making a contribution to the Film Center. And please take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Be kind to strangers, and have a good night. Thanks.